This happened when I was 5, and my best friend was 6. A quick school layout. The building was L-shaped. The short end was not in use at the moment, and cars could stop to the right of the L, in full view, or behind the short part, mostly obscured. The road was pretty much in a square around the school, but only in the aforementioned places could cars pull over. We were at school one day, and she had done something that had made me angry. She grabbed my colorful pens without asking. I decided that I wanted revenge. Shortly afterwards, recess started, and about halfway through I saw my best friend walking towards the back of the short building. I followed her, thinking she was going to do something fun. When I rounded the corner, I saw a man in a car, trying to give her candy through the open passenger door. My childish mind thought, why doesn't that guy just step out to get the candy? Now he's holding it just outside her reach. She has to climb into the car to grab it, and his seat will get all dirty. My friend already had one knee on the car seat, reaching for the candy now. I suddenly realized that this was the perfect time for my revenge. I'd stop her from getting the candy from this man. So I yelled at her that she wasn't allowed to be this close to the road. We'd get in heaps of trouble if caught near the road instead of on the playground, and that I'd tell on her. This caused her to jolt back, and she ran away from the car back to the school ground, taunting me with the fact that a passerby thought she was so pretty that he wanted to give her candy, but not me. Apparently, a teacher had seen me walking towards the road, and was on her way to fetch me. She was just around the corner from us when my friend started taunting me. She heard what was said and quickly ran the last few steps towards us, frantically asking, "Did anyone get in a car? Did you see any classmates getting into a car?" She was clearly panicking, and the car had long gone by now, having driven off right away when I yelled at my friend. My friend answered, "No, the nice man just wanted to give me candy. I really wanted it, but are we in trouble now?" The teacher escorted us inside, and had all the other teachers count heads. Luckily, everyone was there. Then they talked to the police that were called. Neither me nor my friend knew what was wrong at the time, until her parents came to fetch her and gave her a stern talking to about accepting candy from strangers, saying things like, "We've talked about this, and we have plenty of candy back home." My mom was proud of me because she thought I listened to the stranger danger talks and protected my friend, and I didn't care to correct her. A few years ago, my best friend and I were talking about our old school, and this day came up. We both just realized that if I hadn't been so obsessed with those pens, or if she had asked before taking them, that she could have been kidnapped and suffered a pretty bad fate. She couldn't believe how stupid she was for thinking a random guy would really offer candy to kids from his car, especially since her parents had warned her about strangers before. I felt embarrassed for not recognizing the situation from talks that had been given to me, and being so focused on getting revenge. It took me a while longer to fully realize what could have happened to her. I don't know if the guy was ever arrested or did anything else. After this incident, my school started permanently posting a teacher as a lookout near the road. As far as I know, there were no more incidents at that school, and it was never really spoken of again. The official reason for the lookout teacher was to prevent students from running out onto the road and getting run over. When I drove past last year, they had put a fence all around the school. I'm guessing it's because they finally realized a fence is cheaper than paying someone an hour a day just to stand around. Hi everyone. So lately I've had some requests to finally share the whole story of the homeless man I accidentally took in as a tenant, and the incidents that followed. I'm just saying in advance, this is a long one, but every detail is relevant. Although everything I've documented is factual, the case was never solved and has likely gone cold, since this happened more than 10 years ago. So, back in 2007, I found myself working as a bartender at a now-closed pub in my hometown. Not a job I particularly liked, but it paid the bills. At this time, they had hired a new kitchen manager that we all simply knew as Kearney. Kearney was a pleasant enough man, mostly keeping to himself, but he always stayed late to help the barmen do our closing duties, so we all liked him for that. New in town, Kearney had yet to find a place of permanent residence, and I had recently lost my tenants, so someone suggested he ask me. He was considerably older than the tenants I usually took in, but having a streak of bad luck with tenants my own age, I thought an older man with a nice steady job may be a shift in the right direction, so I agreed. Kearney wasted no time and followed me home that very same night, only he wasn't alone. Enter Lawrence, the boyfriend of Kearney. Honestly, I hadn't even realized he was gay up to that point, but it was water off my back regardless. Looking back now, what really should have bothered me though was Lawrence's appearance. He looked like he had been sleeping on the street, rather appropriately as I would later find out. So, Kearney moved in. Lawrence was there a lot too, and it was easy to know when due to his mobile ringtone sounding like the quacking of a duckling. Kearney had some habits that were rather noteworthy to this story. In particular, he basically never closed his bedroom door, no matter what he was doing in there. It was always open, and although he was a very heavy smoker, he never once smoked inside the house. So Kearney had been living there for about 2 weeks, when I had come down with an awful case of pink eye. This being highly contagious, I was given leave of absence from my bartending job, and therefore decided to go wait it out at my sister's for a few days. Apparently, I didn't mind giving it to her. Sorry, sis. So the day that my sister was scheduled to come pick me up, I couldn't drive yet at the time. I took a casual stroll into the bar that myself and Ben, my good friend from high school, and at the time co-worker, had been building in my house. Something caught my eye. All of our liquor bottles were completely empty. Now, those who had been frequenting my house at the time would know that we weren't just talking about 1 or 2 bottles of brandy here, but bottles of whiskey, gin, vodka, schnapps, liqueurs, and basically, it was a fully stocked bar that could host a pretty big party without requiring much in the way of additions. So I called Kearney in, asking him what he knew about this, receiving feedback that Lawrence and him had been on a slight drinking binge. Those were the actual words he used. That left me both furious about the thousands of dollars worth of stock they had drunk, but also slightly impressed that he was still alive somehow. Regardless, I said that I would be dealing with this upon my return. So I'm with my sister for a few days, and on Friday got a call from my local police department, asking me if I know a Conrad Schultz. Ironically enough, I didn't. They finally add that I'll probably know him as Kearney, and that I should probably come down to the station right away. They had just arrested his boyfriend, trying to sell my camera equipment. My sister rushes me back home, where all my camera equipment was on display at the police station. It's on this visit that I'm informed that Lawrence was actually a Navy SEAL, who got dishonorably discharged, before turning to a life of crime. He had a rap sheet the length of the Bible. The kicker was that both he and Kearney were actually homeless men, who had met at the Salvation Army. So Lawrence is in jail, and my sister drops me off at home, more or less at the same time Kearney gets home as well. Based on Kearney's account of what happened, he had turned Lawrence in himself, as he couldn't allow Lawrence to do to me what he was trying to. Although I had appreciated his sacrifice, I still told Kearney that he would have to go, having been the overall cause of all of this. However, not wanting to leave a homeless man, well, homeless, I gave him until the end of the month to make other arrangements. So Monday comes, and having just completed a staff meeting, I walk home to encounter a very much free Lawrence sitting on the sidewalk across from my house, watching it. I confront Lawrence as to why he's there, and he tries to apologize before begging for some money. Rather out of character for him, really. I dismissed him without giving him a cent. Now I go back to the previous night. See, I had mentioned the staff meeting for a reason, as it was at that meeting where we had all gotten a rather sizable list of liquor bottles that had gone missing from the storeroom, leaving us all suspecting each other. I, however, would not have long to wait to figure out who the real culprit was, as a few days later, I opened the garbage bin in my kitchen to see all of the missing bottles, empty and staring back at me. I decided to sit on this information for the time being, although I did photograph it just in case if I needed it for evidence later. I had also called over Ben to inform him of the developments. As this was quickly becoming a detective game, we decided to enter Kearney's room to search for further evidence. Nothing of vast significance in there, with one exception. 2 single photographs of Lawrence, before he had turned into the homeless version of Lex Luthor or Charles Xavier. Actually, there were several of Lawrence's things in there, but as Lawrence had spent a lot of time there before the incident, I accepted this as normal. I should also add that I had mentioned Lawrence's release to Kearney, and had told him that if I even suspected they were still seeing each other, I would throw him out of the house myself. Only a few days would pass before this came into play. On this particular night, I had been bartending again, and Kearney had constantly been stopping by the bar to help himself to draft glasses half full of wine and half full of Coke, which he would go drink outside the restaurant. We confronted him about this, but as he correctly pointed out, he was still a manager and we had no right to tell him what he could or could not do. On his 4th trip, however, I had grown suspicious and decided to follow him outside. I encountered Lawrence sitting outside, sharing the concoctions with Kearney. This pissed me off, so the next day I returned to the restaurant with my photographic evidence. I handed it over to the general manager, who was also kind of a friend of mine. Although I hadn't physically seen it, I had heard the confrontation through the office door when he fired Kearney. Kearney laughed, obviously upset, and apparently had no idea that I had been the one who turned him in. So we had closed early that night, and I was walking home going past the high school. I saw Kearney coming from the opposite direction. He walked past me, literally only saying 2 words, "I'm scared," before disappearing into the darkness. That would be the last time that I would ever physically lay my eyes on Conrad Schultz. So we reached the final week before Kearney's eviction was to take place. Ben had come to stay with me for that duration, as we both wanted to monitor the situation and make sure that nothing else crazy happened. It was in this week that Kearney's behavior suddenly changed. He was constantly smoking in his room, and his door was closed 24/7. In fact, neither Ben nor I had caught so much as a peek of him in that entire week. We hadn't thought much of it at the time. So the day of Kearney's eviction comes around. Ben had gone home for a few hours, and I finally hear Kearney's bedroom door open. Someone walks out of the room, opens the front door, and leaves. I follow him outside, but somehow he had already completely disappeared. What was left, though, was his house keys, indicating that he obviously wasn't planning on coming back. I took a look at the keys, noticing something strange. Although the correct keys were all on the keychain, there were also several that weren't mine. Why would he leave me the wrong keys? I remember myself thinking this as I walked into his room. His room was a shock, not because of the state it was in. The 2 had broken his bed in an act of wild monkey sex, but I had known about that already. But more that he had literally left almost all of his belongings behind, with one exception. You guessed it, the 2 photos of Lawrence. Upon further investigation, I suddenly realized that all traces of Lawrence ever being there had completely vanished, with all of Kearney's stuff left behind. There was one thing of Lawrence left behind, though: his duckling ringtone, which it turned out hadn't been so much a ringtone as an actual duckling, which now strolled around casually in the vacant bedroom. We named him Neville. So Ben returns and gets updated about the developments, both of us thinking that the way he left was rather weird. Of course, this whole situation had been weird. It was only when I asked the infamous question that this all became a conspiracy theory. Hey, did you ever actually see Kearney in this last week? It was to our shock that we realized that neither of us ever had. Suddenly putting puzzle pieces together. The changing habits, Neville the duck, the wrong keys, only Lawrence's stuff being gone. It was with great discomfort that we both asked the question: who had really been living in our house this last week? During the next few days, Ben and I went on a mission, searching the town, crawling into drain pipes, trying to find any trace of Kearney's whereabouts. They all added up to nothing. Conrad Schultz had simply vanished off the face of the earth. That wasn't the case with Lawrence, though. He was still around, having made some new homeless friends. We encountered him several times begging on the streets. I would ask him every time, "Where's Kearney, Lawrence?" But he acted like he had never heard of him. The last time I would see Lawrence was across from work, attempting to break into a car. I had called the police on him, and they had arrived rather quickly, arresting him on the spot. While he was being led away by the police, I shouted after him one last time, "Where is Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just ignored me and let the cops take him away. The next day I filed a police report, reporting Kearney as a missing person, and suggesting that Lawrence may know something about it. But nothing ever came of it. For those asking if anything ever came of the case, unfortunately not. I should probably add that South Africa has a unique way of closing cases, as in, after a month or two, they just send you a text saying case closed due to lack of evidence. I didn't get one in this case, but did get one in an armed robbery which I fell victim to back in 2017, so not too hopeful that they did too much effort here. Regarding Lawrence, I saw him one more time after getting arrested. He was only locked up for about a week. After that, though, he disappeared. I'm not sure if he just left town or what. I posted once before about a break-in when I was a teenager. I decided to post again about another creepy experience. My husband and I love to go driving. We prefer road trips, but on the weekends or nights when we have nothing better to do, we go cruising and just drive around a bit. We prefer smooth and not busy roads. On this particular night, we were a bit bored and decided to go cruising. We went up north to a small town, about half an hour from the city where the roads are curvy and smooth. This town is close to the mountains, and if you follow this particular main street all the way up north, it starts driving up to a mountain. It's about 9 p.m., and there are very few cars in the roads already, since it's a little cute town. But we keep going north away from the houses and stores, and eventually to where the roads start curving uphill. We drive for about 15 minutes more, and it's pitch black, and we see some blinking lights. As we get closer, we see that a truck is on the side of the road facing us. I'm getting the chills thinking about being all the way out here in the middle of nowhere and a stranded truck on the side of the road. As he slowly approaches closer, I tell my husband it's probably for the best to turn back. I had a bad feeling, but at this point we were pretty much next to the truck. As he pulls up next to it, a young blonde man, maybe in his late 20s, comes around and gets next to our window. I got such a bad vibe by this man, I told my husband not to put the window down. I think he also got a weird feeling, so he listened right away. He kind of just loudly asks through the window what's wrong. The guy says something's wrong with his truck and that he might need a hand. His phone is dead. My husband asks what happened, but the man insists on showing him and says to come take a look. He says it very friendly and even calls him bro and says he's so glad we pulled up. My husband says, "You know what, I won't be of much help. I know nothing about cars, but let me call someone." He knows a lot about cars. This guy is insisting and starts getting visibly upset. I'm looking back at the truck, and I think I catch movement inside. I tell my husband I think we should go right now. He probably saw the look of fear on my face because he put the car in reverse. But as he did that, the man is now behind our car, acting stressed out, rubbing his face and pacing. My husband decides to go forward then. We drive up for maybe 2 minutes, trying to find a place to turn around since the road is so narrow. The road turns to dirt road, and there's a little more space on the side, so we was finally able to turn the car around. I was dreading going back that way now, and our phones had no signal at all. In my mind, I know that this could all be really someone with car problems. Maybe a friend is just in the truck too. He never said he was alone. I just can't help the bad feeling in my gut. We soon reached the area where the truck had been, but now there's no truck at all. We drive down maybe another 5 minutes, but no trace of the truck, and we're sure we'd passed the place where it had been. Like I said, we didn't drive up too far to begin with. I'm both relieved and terrified that the truck was no longer there. If it had really broken down and they couldn't fix it, how did they get it to work again in such a short time? Calming myself down, I'm telling my husband, hey, maybe they really did get it to work. Maybe it just turned on all of a sudden and they were able to drive off. A bit suspicious, but not impossible. As we keep driving through and the roads are straightening out, we notice far off the truck with all of its lights off, parked to the side again. We notice movement coming from the bed of the truck. I say out loud, why did they turn off all the lights? I think they thought we were still too far away to see them, but we see 2 figures get on the other side of the truck and crouch down, as if hiding. We get closer and my husband floors it. As we drive past, 2 men get up, one of them the man we had spoken to, and someone else, both with a very surprised look on their faces. One of them runs behind us for a bit, and we see them get tinier in the back. I kept looking back, terrified, but it was dark back there now. All of a sudden I see the headlights of the truck turn on, and start driving our direction very fast. My husband kept going as fast as possible, and eventually we lost the headlights. I keep looking back the rest of the way, so scared that they're somehow still following us. Maybe they had turned off their lights again and I couldn't see them. After driving for a very long time back to the city, we convince ourselves that we lost them. We do call the non-emergency line and give a description of what we saw. No, we didn't get the plates of the truck. It was all so fast, and in all the fear I didn't think to get them. We just gave a description of the guy we saw, the type of truck it was, but there was really nothing that could be done. I realize all this could be rationalized, but in the moment we were filled with terror, being out there in the middle of nowhere. They could have been armed. They could have put their truck sideways and left us with nowhere to go. They could have put something out on the road to rip up our tires. Even though it could all have some explanation, there's still so many questions. Why couldn't he tell us what was wrong? How did the truck work again so fast? Why did they hide? It's been about a year now, and this is just a creepy experience now. We still go cruising, but usually we just stick to a little more civilized areas, at least for the nighttime cruises.